and Facebook. Tonight, we want to begin by first looking at what people are saying about the coronavirus. And we have quite a number of comments on Twitter, just random comments there. We have Bosira Douglas who is saying, hashtag coronavirus, how can students keep record of anyone they interact with? Good question there. Also, we have Village Elder. Village Elder is saying, I'm just curious, does this coronavirus die immediately the host dies? Just read somewhere that doctors in China will find the virus still active 27 days after host's death. Is this true? We hope to answer those questions because we have a doctor in studio. And of course, we also have here just different comments from different people about the coronavirus. We have Connie Nyakio Minor who's saying, when you've been single all your life and now the world is ending, we don't believe it's ending. Let's just be a bit hopeful and optimistic that there will be light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, we also here have the remnant who is saying, sasa juu tunaambiwa tusiguse mapua na mdomo na macho, mtu akiamka asikie kujikuna uso. Well, those are some of the comments that we have sampled for you right on Twitter, just basically about the coronavirus and what different people are saying. Of course, I must mention that with us in studio is an able panel to discuss all matters coronavirus. We have Areba Samba, who is a political strategist. And we also have Dr. Samrat Shah, who is a consultant physician. Gentlemen, how are you feeling today? You guys look dull. It's not all bad, by the way. You're good?
Yes.
Araba came here rushing, but we're glad that you're in studio. However, we want to begin with this particular story that informs our discussion right into today's show, where we're talking about various countries continue to ramp up efforts towards sensitizing their citizens and placing those that have tested positive for the coronavirus in quarantine so that they can receive necessary treatment. Kenya being one of the countries with confirmed cases of coronavirus, there has been misconception about the coronavirus and its spread. Our reporter Fiona Kenga was in the field today and files the following report.
When you see the president himself coming out to update the country about something, it shows you the seriousness that the government is having in handling the matter. So I believe, first of all, the government is very serious about dealing with the corona issue. Coming to the issue about how we are going to fight or to avoid infection, I think it's going to be a bit hard in our country, because first of all, a big percentage of Kenyans are using matatus. Coming to town personally, I just used a matatu, and I complained a lot because there was too much contact between me and other people, and other even sitting in the matatu seats, watu wanashikana, people are just like, it's like they are holding each other. So if at all we are to avoid contact with the other people, it's not going to be so easy, because even this we see in town, most of them are going to go back to their homes using matatus. So it's not going to be very easy. Again, the matatu operators, I heard the president saying that we should have those liquids that we are using to clean our hands. And I never saw any of them having them. I stood at the stage for like 20 minutes. I never saw any matatu having them. But coming here, I passed through the school where my kids do learn, and I saw them having that. Yeah, coming to the cashless economy, it's also not going to be very easy. I know it's like every Kenyan above the age of 18 has a phone. But some of the people we are dealing with, like making payments in those matatu vehicles, those people are not having those pay bill or Lipa na M-Pesa or phone numbers that we are supposed to send money to. In fact, I tried to inquire from one of them if that was available, and he said if we send money to those things, then they would not get their pay in the evening. It's like the money would go directly to the owner of the vehicle, and then if they ask them for pay in the evening, he won't give them. It's like they normally work, get the money, deduct their pay, and then resend the rest to the owner of the vehicle. So it's like that one is close to impossible. In the supermarkets, it's possible, but when coming to the public service vehicles, that won't be very possible.
Na hii ugonjwa yenyewe imetustua. Tumestuka, everybody amestuka juu ya ugonjwa. Juu kitu ya kwanza tunaangalia uchumi vile itarudi chini, tunastuka. Alafu sasa ile kitu ningetaka kuongelea, kama hii 20 bob nimerudishiwa kwa gari. Sasa hii 20 bob kutoka asubuhi imesuguka watu wengi sana, na bado nitaitumia. So kabla ifike jioni, hii 20 bob itakuwa imetumika kwa watu wengi sana, na hii kitu tunaambia ukigusa shuma nini ina haya. Kwa hiyo gari nimekuja naye, kuna dirisha joto ikisidi nafungua, ikianza kupata mwendo nini upepo ikiwa mingi nafunga, unanielewa? Nikitoka pia nashika ile shuma mpaka mwisho mpaka. So hapa ni pale tunasema Mungu atusaidie. Ugonjwa, mimi ningeomba serikali ishikane na dunia iangalie hasa ni nini wanaweza, hata kama ni dawa ya kuprotect ndio ikikushika hizi isiwe na nguvu, na hiyo ndio inaweza kuwa suluhisho mzuri sana. Ya pili, kama hii dawa anasema ya kuosha mkono, kuna watu waesi afford. Utakuta saa nyingine mtu anaenda kufua nguo na pio 200. Hawezi nunua, atanunua watoto unga. So yenyewe tuseme kuna shida. Hii nituombe Mungu atusaidie.
Ni yangu kama Mkenya, nilikuwa ninaona ile mzuri kabisa. Serikali haigesimamisha kanjo kama wana sete kanzo, wangekuwa wameweka kama mbalia na wapasaidie na sabuni. Sasa sisi tukifika hapo tunaoga kabla ya tuingie town. Na pia wale watu wanatoka town pia wanafanya namna hiyo. Serikali sasa ingekuwa inafanya njia mzuri sana. Maana kuna watu hawa-afford hiyo sabuni. Vitu kidogo kama ya shilingi 5, shilingi 10. Mtoto anataka kitu mpaka pesa tutashika. Hiyo directive hii ya serikali itoe sabuni. Wale wafanyakazi wa City Council hata ama watoe vipulisi. Kuna vipulisi zinatoanga joto ya kama kuchoma. Pesa zinapita hapo. Hiyo ndio itasaidia zaidi. Maana serikali ndio inaweza kufanya hivyo. Sisi watu hatuwezi.
Hiyo masi hakuna kitu nasaidia. Kita kushika na kushika tu. Kwanza hiyo ndio iko na jams nyingi sana. Kila mtu ana pesa ya kutumia kuweka kwa Airtel na M-Pesa. Unajua mtu anaweza kupatia pesa anatumia pesa. Na zile nchi hata zile ziko na shida wajakataza watu kutumia pesa.
Na ningechangia niseme alifanya vizuri sana, kwa sababu hawa watu ni wengi wakiwa shuleni watapata shida. Lakini ningesema hivi, hizo shule NAT na directors wa shule zote waende training, wapatiwe training ya 2 to 3 days ikiwezekana, kama kutakuwa resources, kwa sababu wao ndio wanakaa na watoto mara nyingi.
Well, that particular story by our very own Fiona Kenga informs the first part of our discussion. And again, I'll introduce my panel. Right beside me is Dr. Samrat Shah, who is a consultant physician. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
And I have there Areba Samba, who is a political strategist.
And
Thank you. Well, an advocate too. Listening to that story, of course, you get the feeling that Kenyans are worried. You know, some of them are very concerned. And of course, there are a lot of myths that surround what coronavirus is all about. And I think I want us to begin there. And I'll begin with you, Dr. Shah. Just help us understand what coronavirus really is for that person who's asking what this virus is all about.
Yeah. You see, the coronavirus is basically a disease of animals. Yeah. And we also, human beings, had coronavirus a long time back. We have this coronavirus disease since a long time. But this strain, what we have presently, it is mainly found in animals. It was not a strain which was supposed to infect the human beings. But it has been changed, this mutation, and it has come down to human beings now. Now, it's a viral infection which spreads by droplets. By droplets, I mean when you cough, when you sneeze, that is the point when you're going to transmit these viruses from one person to other person. So what happens is, when you cough or sneeze, within the 100 meters area, that is the place where these droplets go and settle down. If someone is standing next to you within the 100 meters area, you're likely to get infected by droplets. If not, when you sit on a table and cough or sneeze there, the droplets will settle down on the table. I touch my hands with that table, or I leave, the next person comes, he touches the table, the viruses comes on my hands. When they are seen on the hands, the moment you touch your hands, in your mouth, in your nose, in your eyes, you're likely to transmit the virus from your hands to your eyes, mouth and nose, and that is the point when it starts getting infected to you. That's why it is very important to sanitize your hands so that you kill the germs present in the hand before you touch your face. Because see, as a human being, we have habit of touching our face. So that's the way it transmits to human beings. Yeah. So I think it's more of
basically you're saying it mutated. It's a virus that was affecting animals.
Yes.
But now it has mutated to the point that it's now affecting human beings.
Human beings. This strain of virus has mutated. We had coronavirus in human beings also. Like the most common cause of flu, even in children today, also remains coronavirus. But this was not the strain. This is a mutated strain which has caused severity of the disease.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I just want us to look. We were speaking with my director earlier on, Linda Elela, and she was telling me how she was in a matatu, and people were actually, all of them, they're on the phone just checking what coronavirus and whatnot. And I think what's interesting is basically how people are so concerned. But I think also there's the question of just a little cough and someone gets very concerned. They think, oh wow, she or he must have coronavirus. And I just want to ask you, Areba, in the interest of, taking care of the issue of discrimination and stigma, how do we deal with that right now so that we don't end up stigmatizing people who may actually test positive for this virus?
I think one of the things that we need to realize is there has to be really a great government intervention in terms of dealing with this situation, considering that then healthcare primarily rests on the government, and only development partners and other than the private sector only comes in to complement the healthcare system. And that is where you so rarely will you see the president coming out on a weekend and marshalling his troops and saying, hey guys, I think it's time, fun has hit the road and we need to come out decisively and deal with this. On the national level, we are seeing that already we seem to have some kind of infrastructure to deal with the issue. But again, you get to realize that we have devolution and the healthcare system is devolved. What level of preparedness do we have in the counties? I was sharing with somebody before that there are counties which have isolation rooms, thinking that an isolation room is just a room somewhere in the middle of the village, and then you call it an isolation room. Dr. will tell you that there has to be the requisite infrastructure to consider that an isolation room. How prepared are our counties in terms of the healthcare? And there's something that we have ignored for a very long time, the issue of primary healthcare. How have we upscaled it in the face of now the coronavirus? And one of the things I would want to talk now, like from the policy perspective, is emergency preparedness is something that needs to be there every day. We don't have to wait for a pandemic or a calamity to hit us, then we realize, hey, we need to be prepared. The healthcare guys have always talked that we don't have enough bed capacity when it comes to ICU and when it comes to critical care. Is it now that we are realizing that we need those beds?
Even as you talk about preparedness in the counties, we do have a story, and I think my director will probably run it as we continue. Basically, the story here is talking about the counties. Just a bit of a roundup. If my director can take us to that particular story by our very own Baraza, who definitely during the day did make that effort where, he was actually trying to capture the situation in the counties. And this is one day after President Uhuru Kenyatta issued a raft of measures to curb the spread of the deadly coronavirus. Governors in various counties of the Republic of Kenya have followed suit and issued directives meant to contain COVID-19 that has so far killed over 7,000 people globally. Well, our reporter, Boniface Baraza, as I've mentioned, had the opportunity to go across different areas and just file this report on the coronavirus. Let's take a look.
In Trans Nzoia County, the county boss Patrick Haimba has banned burials, weddings, among other social gatherings in bid to combat the COVID-19.
Congregation at funerals, minimize all those. The hugging, the kissing, the weddings, funerals, I've talked about them. We want this to be left to family members. But things like wedding, it can wait. A funeral cannot wait, but wedding can wait. But even funerals, we are saying only family members. I know we love funerals, but please, for the first time, leave the family members. support them, send them M-Pesa.
The same has been replicated in Kisumu County, where Governor Professor Peter Nyang'nyong'o has warned politicians to desist from converting burial ceremonies into political platforms until such a time the country is free from corona pandemic.
They should not be made too long, so that people sweat, whatnot. Let us make them short and to the point. And I appeal to politicians, until we finish the coronavirus crisis, please let us deal with funerals. Go consult the families, say you are with them at this moment of crisis. Go and talk about BBI in offices.
In Mombasa County, Governor Ali Hassan Joho has ordered closure of nightclubs and bars. Similar directive has been issued in Trans Nzoia, where Abdullahi Khalifa, the Deputy County Commissioner, has asked owners of bar and clubs to comply to the directive.
We have done door-to-door campaigns on sensitization of wananchi through our structures, chiefs, assistant chiefs, village elders, nyumba kumi, and today we have declared that nightclubs will not operate. Those directives will be cascaded to all security agencies to ensure that this ban is effected.
In Uasin Gishu and Nandi counties, the sittings of the respective county assemblies have been suspended until further notice. Elsewhere, Kakamega County Governor, who is also the chairman of Council of Governors Wycliffe Oparanya, has asked the people with bodies in the morgue to pick them and bury them immediately.
All bodies at the mortuary. At our mortuary here, the owners should come and pick them and make a quick burial, and we're waiving all mortuary expenses that they are in, so that they are able to pick them without any problem. And we are now directing that any deaths, we are not going to take anybody to our mortuary.
On his part, Senator Cleophas Malala asked the national government to disperse more funds to counties to be able to help in mitigating the pandemic.
National government, release pesa haraka. They should stop these PR statements they are issuing in Afya House. Kila wakati mna issue statements na tukikuja kwa ground hakuna pesa ambayo mmetuma ya kusaidia hospitali zetu.
Open markets have also been closed in Kakamega and Elgeyo Marakwet County respectively. Finally, in Kiambu County, Ruiru legislator Simon King'ara has sensitized locals on safety precautions against deadly COVID-19.
Hizo kwanza ni hata sisi wananchi. Usafi uanze na wewe, kujikinga kuanze na wewe, usingojee tu serikali, usingojee mwingine, anza na wewe. Hasa usikongamane mahali ambayo hakuna maana, na vile vile nawa mikono wakati wote.
Boniface Barasa, TV47, Trans Nzoia County.
Thank you for that report, Boniface Baraza. Gentlemen, I mean, listening to some of the comments there, some people think this is just a matter of PR. What are your thoughts about the preparedness in the counties? Areba?
I'll shoot first. If at all that is PR, that is bad PR. I mean, there is only one county which I've seen trying to make efforts to deal with this issue, and that is Mombasa County. The governor did do a tour of the isolation department, and I could see that it's a bit of preparation there. But now, when you go to Kakamega County, all you're being told is, please don't bring bodies to the morgue. We should have seen the governor taking us a tour, telling us, this is our isolation unit. This is the bed capacity that we have. These are the number of medical personnel that we have trained. I saw another governor the other day launching something looking like a beekeeping suit and then telling us that, hey, we are ready for corona. If in the counties we have not been able to deal with malaria, we do not have enough water in our hospitals, how then can somebody have the courage, which sometimes I call the courage of a fool, to stand and say, hey, we are ready for corona? I mean, they need to just ask for assistance, be it from development partners, the private sector, or even the national government. There is no governor there who has said anything that makes sense to me.
Dr. Shah, I believe you've been on the ground. What's the situation right now? Listening to Areba, of course, he doesn't feel satisfied with what some of the government officials are saying. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree with him. You see, we first think what we need for coronavirus preparedness is the testing capacity. Unless you test, you cannot know whether there is corona or not. If you don't know, what is the point in having a facility? Every county government should have a testing facility for coronavirus, because we have only reported 3 cases. This is just a tip of iceberg what we are seeing. There must be thousands of cases of corona in the country also which are not being detected because we don't have that testing facility. The first thing they should do is have a testing facility, then have isolation rooms. Isolation is not just what they are talking about. Isolation wards are completely different setup which in every county government should have. But apart from that, these measures are not going to be enough for us. Right. Because if it's going to start spreading corona, we see the corona of pandemics has 4 stages. The stage 1 is when you import the disease from outside countries into the country. Stage 2 is when there is local transmission from that person to 1 or 2 people. This is second week of the stage 2. Then when it comes to stage 3, it starts affecting hundreds. Like we see what happened in Italy. There was 3 cases in the first week, 600 cases in second week, and by the end of third week, they had 20,000 people affected. Because it starts spreading. So basically you're saying what we need to do, even before you get the symptoms, yes, you should actually just walk into the hospital and just check if at all you have any symptoms. Not required. Ideally, what is to be done is, any patient who is having fever, dry cough or breathing difficulty, irrespective of whether he has a history of contact with the travel person or not, because now you never know who has come in contact with whom. So they need to be tested for coronavirus. The testing facility should be available. Once they are positive, they need to be isolated. Not just that, we need to crack down each and every contact person of that person and then isolate all of them. That's the only way which is going to control it, otherwise it's going to be a disaster.
All right, and if my director can just put up some of those symptoms, I think even as we talk about symptoms, it's very important to just touch on them so that when someone is actually, feeling any kind of thing, like some of the symptoms that you're mentioning, a dry cough, feeling a bit of a fever, maybe they need to actually know what the symptoms are all about. Maybe if you can just mention some of them, Dr. Shah.
Yeah. I would like to first tell the difference between a common cold or a flu and the coronavirus infection. People are scared that anybody who is sneezing is having a coronavirus because that amount of scarcity, that scariness and the fear has been put in people. Common cold or flu comes with a running nose, throat irritation, or if they have sputum, they have productive cough and productive sputum, and they have myalgia. These are the kind of symptoms where common cold have. Whereas when you talk of corona, it doesn't have running nose. It's very rare to have a running nose in coronavirus patients. It doesn't have a throat irritation that common. The very common feature is fever. Fever should be there. After that, there should be a dry cough. Then there should be a breathing difficulty. When you have these 3 symptoms, only then we consider it can be a case of corona. But it's not just the end. After this, we do a chest x-ray, we do a CT scan of the lung. There are so many findings which we see in the lungs. If those things are in favor of corona, only then we consider it as coronavirus.
You've mentioned something interesting about having a running nose. Does that indicate perhaps you don't have the coronavirus?
Yeah, running nose is very rare feature of coronavirus. COVID-19 does not have running nose as a common feature. It's more, when you have running nose, it's more of allergic rhinitis or it's more of common cold but not corona.
All right.
Yeah.
And Araba, looking at the president's address yesterday, directing that the government suspend all travel for persons coming into the country, do you think this directive came a little too late?
Yes, and again, I had this argument that when you're in leadership position, sometimes you need to measure what you say. Sometimes back we had the CS for Transport, Macharia, giving some statements when it became obvious that some people were being allowed to travel from the countries which were hard hit. Now he had to eat his humble pie. And even the courts themselves did say that we need to have measures to ensure that the 239 people who flew into the country, there was a way of tracking them down and having them quarantined, but the same was not done. So first of all, I commend the President and the CS for Health and the PS for Health for trying to come up with ways to avert further spread. I mean, it should have been done earlier, but then at least something has been done. So far, so good. And even if you see the kind of response we are having from the national government, is that it's basically something that has touched on the president's doorstep. And that is where you see he's up and arms and trying to deal with the issue. So it came a bit too late, but we're glad it came earlier than later.
Yeah. All right, we want to take a short break. And remember, you can engage us through our social media platforms to be a part of this discussion. That's TV47KE on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Tell us also where you're writing from. And of course, we will be sampling some of your views and comments. Right now, though, we want to take a short break. Don't go too far. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching New Week on TV47, and we are tonight talking about all matters corona. With me in studio again, if I can introduce my panel again, I have next to me Dr. Samrat Shah, who is a consultant physician, and I also have Areba Samba, who is a political strategist. And before we took a break, gentlemen, we were definitely looking at, the preparedness and among other issues. I want us to look at the issue of quarantine. When we talk about self-quarantine, what does that mean?
You see, self-quarantine means you are telling someone that we are trusting you. Please make sure that you isolate yourself in your house. Don't come in contact with people. Make sure that you are staying alone in your house or in the room. You don't use common things for all the family. You use your separate washrooms and separate toilets for yourself. All your instruments, what you're using, phone, what you're using, don't use them. This self-quarantine is mainly for those people who are having symptoms of corona, or it is for those people who have traveled from the countries where corona is prevalent. But self-quarantine is something which is going to be dangerous, because you cannot trust people. How can you trust people and say that this guy is not going to come out for the next 14 days? Imagine if he has cough, fever, or he does not have symptoms as of now, but he has come from a country where there was coronavirus.
So what do you think? Like when you say it's going to be dangerous because there's no accountability,
yes.
What do you think we can do, or the government can initiate towards making sure that people actually take themselves through self-quarantine?
No, so instead of self-quarantine, there should be something called a supervised quarantine, wherein all those people who are traveling from countries being affected from corona are supervised and quarantined for at least 14 days by the government facilities itself. That's the only way we are going to crack them down. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to do that, because having accountability on self-quarantine is going to be a difficult task. So ideally, government should quarantine them under supervision. That's the best thing to do.
Your thoughts?
I mean, this is a country where when there is, let's say, a police operation and you're told do not come out, we will obviously come out to check what's going on. I mean, how do you trust such people to do so? You see, whenever there's a fire or there's an emergency, I mean, as Kenyans, we would rather run out to go and check what's going on. Another interesting case today is that for those who go to court, the Chief Justice ordered that courts should be closed. And I saw somebody asking somewhere, is it true that courts are closed? And then somebody said, let me go and check. I mean, that gives you the peculiar nature of us Kenyans. We say that this is Kenyan, Kenya is our business, in that you've been told to self-quarantine, but you'll just go out to confirm whether indeed somebody knows that you're supposed to be self-quarantined. And as the doctor said, is that from a lay person's perspective, is that this is not tenable, it's not workable, and it's part of probably the problems that we're having right now.
Okay. Interesting thoughts there. Well, I just want us to look at the global perspective right now with one of the reports that one of our reporters produced earlier on, where the world is indeed grappling with the rising cases of coronavirus, with countries across pushing up to halt essential services and closing entities, including schools, entertainment venues, and all public gatherings. Here's our reporter, Salome Moirore, with a global perspective on the coronavirus update.
The new cases of infection of the coronavirus have increased outside China, a country where the virus first originated. In New York, schools, restaurants, bars are being closed down to stop the spread of coronavirus. This as the U.S. extends its travel ban to include the United Kingdom. Currently, 69 people have already lost their lives.
I mean that a lot of public gatherings and spaces are going to be closed, but it makes a lot of sense for public health and safety. So I think everybody just has to stay calm and take it in stride.
Germany has also closed its borders in a bid to contain the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Some of the affected border points include the borders with France, Austria, and Switzerland. The election in France continued despite fears of the spread of the coronavirus. Italy has reported at least 368 new deaths from coronavirus, while the cases of those infected rose 24,747. In Iran, more than 100 people have died in the past 24 hours, with confirmed cases nearing 14,000. In Turkey, at least 12 new cases of coronavirus have been identified. 7 of the new cases had traveled from Europe and 3 from the United States. Refugees and vulnerable countries continue to urgently look up to the UN for funds that will boost the preparedness, prevention and response activities to address the immediate public health needs that have been prompted by the COVID-19. Salome Mwiruri, TV47.
Thank you for that report, Salome Mwiruri. Well, gentlemen, if you have listened to that story, particularly things that she's mentioned there is basically what we've also tried to adopt here in terms of preventative measures. But I want us to look at the history of pandemics. I mean, we have had of cholera outbreaks, we've had of swine flu. Of course, there's one particular one here. I think the name itself, it's called Black Death, I think, and it had around 200 million people, who passed on. And, when you look at this history, as you can see there, different pandemics, different years, and some of them 5 million, 1 million, 200 million people dying, 56 million. And this is globally, So I think the question that begs at this point is basically, what are we doing? What are we supposed to do as a global community to cushion ourselves from these outbreaks?
See, I think all these viral infections, like when you talk about swine flu, all these things are infections which are spreading because of animals intake. I think the first thing we need to have is have meat hygiene. That is the first thing to have. Second thing is, all these viral infections are mainly, all those flus what we can see, they're mainly because of lack of personal hygiene. Like what we are practicing now, it should be regularly practiced all across. That's the second thing to be done. And having meat intake, we should always be cautious about taking meat intake, especially the Chinese meat intake, what they have. This is the reason why we have swine flu, why we have MERS, why we had SARS, why we had outbreak of corona now. All these things are because of not having the hygienic practices of meat eating and eating something which is not to be eaten. I think that's the only reason why we are having all these pandemics coming up again and again. So I think we should be always prepared for a pandemic coming up again. We never know, we may have one more pandemic in the next few years. The preparedness is always necessary. We should not wait for the pandemic to come and then we start preparing.
All right, what do you have to say, Areba, especially about preparedness?
Actually, we are all working towards becoming a global village where the movement of people and goods is seamless across the borders. With that open border policy, then such challenges get to also be faced more than we would have a closed policy. And mainly for Africa, one of the challenges that we have in African countries is the level of preparedness when it comes to an emergency. You saw what happened in China. Which other country can have capacity of putting up a hospital of such magnitude in less than a week? We live in countries where somebody made a joke that there's one road which has taken 3 years to construct. But then how are we able to deal with those emergencies? And I'll give an example of Kenya. Remember that we have the National Disaster Management Team. At the county level, we have kitties which are supposed to do with emergencies. And unfortunately for those kitties, we only use that money to go and benchmark on how to deal with emergencies and forget to actually invest in infrastructure to deal with an emergency. You'll be shocked right now that if you call an ambulance from, let's say, a county government, they will first of all have to seek authorization, go probably for fuel. After getting fuel, then they say, oh, the tire is flat. That shows us that then the level of emergency preparedness is a bit of laxity. I experienced something in Diani some years back. There was a fire where we were staying and we had to call the county government fire truck to come and put out the fire. It took close to 3 hours. Why? Somebody needed to authorize the fire truck. They didn't have fuel and they didn't have water.
So what are the solutions then, Areba?
The solutions is that we have the money. It's only that we need to just agree that let's avoid the mediocre way of doing things. For a very long period of time, we do things in a mediocre way. We don't want to do things the right way. I've just shown the doctor one of the county's isolation unit, and it's just a room that looks like a prison. And that is something that has funds which have been allocated to it. We don't regard human life in Africa. We don't value human life in Africa. And it's high time that these people in leadership positions and whoever has a responsibility of ensuring that human life is protected, they need to listen to professional advice. How many times have we had the health practitioners complaining on the level of preparedness? How many times have we had governors threatening to sack the health practitioners? The issues they have been telling us, now we are in an emergency, and that is when we are trying to implement in them.
Well, let me just play the devil's advocate in this case. Dr. Shah, looking at the United States, a place that's considered to be a superpower, and you listen to President Donald Trump talking about the situation with the coronavirus, and there's still concern that this is a superpower. Is it an issue really of laxity, preparedness? What is it exactly?
With us?
With just globally, the global perspective,
you see,
trickling down to the African region.
No, you see, imagine if the coronavirus had started in Kenya. You think this would have been a big matter by now? No. Because they started in China, they know how to make this aware about the coronavirus to the entire globe. It's just that we need to be prepared. At least I would say, compared to Ebola virus, when Ebola came, everybody started having panic attacks that now we have Ebola.
I would assume that perhaps Donald Trump has been given the same advice that Arabia is giving us towards dealing with coronavirus. So what's really not working?
No, I think preparedness is lacking. Definitely there is lack of preparedness, which I can say, because the test is pretty expensive. What I was told that each test costs around $250 for each person. I think if the government is very much concerned about it, all these county governments, all these government authorities should place the testing facilities first. That preparedness is lacking. Lack of isolation hospitals. You should have an entire building which is isolated for the emergencies like this. You cannot just have a room for it. You need to have an emergency team. You need to have an emergency communication system. You need to have emergency transport, emergency team. Along with that, you need to have CT scans, MRI machines. You need to have ventilators, which are all isolated. They cannot be used for common public. So I think that kind of facilities are lacking. And they think that's the reason why we are having these pandemics.
Let me come to you trying to play the devil's advocate. You look at the way we deal with emergencies and look at how Western countries deal with emergencies. You get to realize that we are probably a number of years behind. Look at the kind of interventions that have been put in Italy, in China. Can we be able to do that in Kenya? We cannot be able to do that in our country right now. And that is why we are saying that whereas that this is something that has spread across the world and little or not much can be done, but the level of dealing with it in the first instance and the level of preparing for the shocks that are going to come after this is what is lacking in our current capacity. I mean, as the doctor has clearly said, compare an isolation unit in, let's say, Siaya County and compare an isolation unit in Italy, you realize that this is just a drastic difference in that the isolation unit probably in Siaya, the only thing that is isolated about it is because it's in a village somewhere, so it's isolated. Okay. And that is what they call isolation.
So then let's say then we're waiting for the government to, put in proper measures to probably protect the Kenyans and protect everyone at large, of course, from the coronavirus and any other let's not even pray that there will be a pandemic, but, just to have those measures in place in case of anything. But Dr. Shah, when we look at now, even as much as we're waiting for the government to continue putting up measures and efforts into addressing the coronavirus cases that may be coming up, what are the individual preventative measures that one can take at an individual level where you can also not just protect yourself, but also protect other Kenyans?
You see, I was just trying to separate those words, corona, and I feel if you follow those things, I think that's more than enough. Wherein C, I would say it stands for case isolation. All those patients who are having those diseases should be immediately reporting to the health authority and isolate themselves and isolate those people who are affected with that. Yeah, that's the first thing to be done. O is, I would say, outing needs to be stopped. If you are having fever, cough, breathing difficulty, outing needs to be stopped. Yeah. R stands for regular hand wash. Yeah, that should be followed. Regular hand wash in the sense there are two ways of it. Either you use a sanitizer which has more than 60% alcohol and wash with your hands. Otherwise, you should have a running tap water. At least 20 seconds you need to wash your hands with soap and water. That is the most important thing to be done. Then apart from that, another O I would say, because now the self-quarantine has been put in place, take an oath that you are going to follow strictly the measures put by government. Do not break the rules what are being put forth by yesterday by the government. That is more important to be followed. N stands for, I would say, no handshake. As much as possible, avoid shaking hands with that. A is, I would say, avoid going in public gatherings. If we can follow these simple things, I think that should be enough to control the pandemic coming up.
All right. Now, I just want to move away from now, just let's go a little bit into politics. And looking at the president's address, Areba, looking at the fact that, why are you smiling?
Because I know the question.
Well, looking at what happened yesterday, I mean, the Deputy President, William Ruto, was not present. It leaves a lot of questions in the minds of many Kenyans. I mean, this is a very serious matter. What do you think was happening there?
I mean, probably the Deputy President was on self-quarantine. But then I wouldn't know how that committee was constituted and how the response team was called upon. But my rallying call is that probably this is not the time to say who's tanga-tangaing, who's lawing, and who's doing what in the political scene, who supports BBI or who does not support BBI. Because if this thing decides to take us down, it's not coming to know which political side you support. So I really feel that the political leaders and the political powers that might be should put their political differences, if any, so that then at the end of the day they can move forward and provide leadership to the country at this particular critical time. For me, I was a bit concerned on why the Deputy President was not there, but then I wouldn't know why he was not there. But going forward, we need to have everybody putting their energies together to ensure that the country gets to deal with this issue decisively.
And do you think this coronavirus might actually be able to achieve the one thing that many people have been asking of, stopping reggae?
Come on, I mean, that is probably something that, I mean, reggae will continue at some point, but then at the particular moment is that we have a problem. Let's deal with it. The only challenge we have as Kenyans is that we get every opportunity to politic. Nothing passes us without putting a political angle in it. And I wish there would be a day where we would look at issues objectively without necessarily trying to put in a political angle. This is a disease. It does not choose who it attacks. It does not choose who dies. So let's put away all our differences, whether you're supporting reggae or you're not supporting it, and let's deal with it once and for all.
All right.
We will politic later.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Shai, even as we come to a close of tonight's discussion, I just want to hear your final comments. What can you tell Kenyans, especially in this difficult time where these people are panicking, others are very concerned, they don't even know what the future holds for the country, having seen what the coronavirus has done to other nations? What will be your final comments?
I would say our immunity towards fear virus is very less compared to that of coronavirus. Do not fear. The fear is more than that of what is supposed to be done. Because coronavirus, I would tell you one thing, I want to stress on these things, 80% of people, they recover on their own with coronavirus. You do not have to worry about it for those people. 10% of people, they develop pneumonias. Of that, hardly 3 to 4% of people are going to die. And only particular patients who are supposed to be more developing pneumonia are those patients who have kidney failure, those patients who have heart failures, those patients who have diabetes, hypertension, HIV. These are the kind of groups who are prone to develop severe form of coronavirus. Apart from that, I don't think so it is something to be feared about. But yes, everyone needs to do what is to be done to prevent this disease from progression.
Areba, your final comments.
Two issues. Number one, the government needs to come up with ways of ensuring that the economic shockwaves we are going to experience are dealt with. You have seen what the IRS has done in the US. You have seen right now schools are closed, no work is going on. But remember, people keep on consuming. So we are going to have a bit of slump in the economy, and it's high time that the monetary policy of the central bank really comes out and gives a way forward. The number two, this is not the time to try and display our ignorance or our lack of knowledge on issues of medication and public health. Let's listen to expert advice. From time immemorial, I've always said that in this country we will move forward if we allowed experts and professionals to lead the way in their professional fields. I mean, as an advocate, I'm not going to argue on what to do about this issue. I'm going to listen to what the doctors are saying. And as the political class, let's give the medical teams, let's give the medical professionals all the support they need at this particular time, because we need them to guide the way. You're not going to come out as an MC and say, hey, let me now teach you guys on how to deal with corona. That is not your work. Can you concentrate on throwing chairs in the county assembly? Those are my closing remarks. And I have my sanitizer.
Well, I should get one myself. Well, on a lighter note, I want us to go back to the presidential address yesterday. The president driving in with an inverted number plate on his car. Dr. Shah, what do you think that means?
I think he should be the right person to answer this.
But I want to hear from you before I go to Areva. Of course, he knows what it means, but I mean, in your thoughts.
I don't know what does it mean. I don't want to comment anything about this.
All right, Areva, what do you think it means?
There's so many theories, but for those who watch The Big Bang Theory, one time Sheldon and Leonard's apartment, which they considered as a country, was under distress, and on that particular day they inverted their flag, and when they were driving to one of the medical stores they inverted their number plate. But that is from The Big Bang Theory.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I mean, this has been a very insightful discussion. I believe that many people have actually listened and learned one or two things about the coronavirus. We hope that we've been able to just create some sense of calm, and that was our intention tonight as TV47. We want to encourage you to remain calm during this trying moment, and remember to pray a lot and just have faith that all things are going to be fine. Well, remember, our discussion tonight has been about the coronavirus. Thank you so much, Dr. Samrat Shah, who is a consultant physician, and of course, there Areva Samba, who is a political strategist. Thank you for making time.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your time very much. My name is Leangare. This has been New Week. Our sign language interpreter tonight was Josephine Oko. Thank you for watching. Again, we meet next week, same time, same place. Good night and God bless.